Southeast Asia, also the controversies about the EDCA militant bases, the controversies about the people are worried about possible proxy war in India, like what is happening in Ukraine now, destabilizing the whole of Europe. Also, another controversial issue, the proposed joint NATO sea patrol, militarizing Pacific Ocean and ASEAN. We have very special speakers from the US and here in the Philippines. I will tell them what my not later. I will mention their names first. Of course, we have from the US the very courageous Mr. Mike Pickington. Later, we will invite Mr. Herman Lauren to properly introduce Mr. Mike Pickington of the Executive Intelligence Review and also of the LaRouche Open. Then also with us dito, Ka-Ado Pagdinawan, and also the very respected, very brilliant, humble, labor leader, Johnny De Guzman. Sa dapat ang luna ng Pilipinas, yung parang Brazil, yung presidente ng Brazil, labor leader na nationalist din. And next, we have inside the Mr. R.J. Hateliana, President ng United Filipino Consumers and Commuters, also WARN, WARNUFCC. Also via Zoom, an intellectual, public intellectual nationalist, Professor Ana Malindokoy. Let us start. Later on, I will call everyone for their opening statement. After the opening statement, we will open the floor for question and answer for media and other guests. We are live on Facebook Live and also via Zoom. To begin, we have a special speaker, Mr. Mike Pickington. We would like to invite Mr. Herman Laurel of the Mr. Laurel is an intellectual and activist. He will properly introduce Mr. Mike Pickington now. Yes. Good evening to everyone there. How are you doing? Thank you with you. I'm actually going to have to the early 2000. It's a very it was prepared by the each state of America in the 80s or 70s. Still was making, but he has been a victim of the pressure against the progressive ideas to reform the United States of America. So I could say hello to our audience. You can hear me? Hello, hello. Hello. Is it you text me? Mike. Can you hear us, Mike?
Do you want me to start?
Microphone.
I'm unmuted.
Can I get one mic? Can I get one mic?
While the audio is being fixed, I'd like to say Mr. Herman Laurel is with the Asian Century Strategic Studies. Hello.
Ask him to speak. Ask him to speak.
Can you speak?
You want me to speak now? I'm muted, but not by me. Somebody there has muted me.
Can you count to five? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It says Global Talk News Radio has muted me.
Okay.
Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? My
Yeah, please. Hello, can you speak for mic? Sir, mic.
I can hear you, but I am muted.
I think I can hear you, Mr. Mike.
We can hear you. We can hear you now. We can hear you now. Can you speak up louder? Thank you.
speak up louder.
So you can hear me now?
Very good now.
Yes,
Very good.
yes, loud and clear, loud and clear.
Oh, okay, so I'll give some introductory remarks. Let me say first that I'm delighted to be back in the Philippines, especially with some very, very good old friends, Mentong, Ado, Ver. I'm delighted to be here with you and with all these other very prominent, esteemed guests. I'm looking forward to what you all have to say on the crisis in facing the Philippines and in the world. Let me start by saying that the issues that you're addressing, I won't address them myself because I'm sure you will, but they're all very critical and dangerous at a moment where the U.S. is clearly planning for a war on China. There has been a process of demonizing Russia and China for a long time. The war on Russia is the most immediate great danger. It could very well become a nuclear war very quickly if the leadership in the US and the UK continue on their current path, which is clearly aimed at destroying Russia and destroying China, even by war and even by nuclear war, if it comes to that. They seem to have no particular concern about the extreme danger of a nuclear war. And the demonization of China has escalated dramatically in the recent times. You probably all heard about the great balloon caper, the extreme danger of China floating a balloon over the United States. This was rather hysterical and caused a lot of laughter, but the way they're using it is extremely dangerous. And you probably also heard that now Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, who has been leading an anti-China hysterical campaign for several years, has now declared that it's determined that the COVID virus came from a leak in the Wuhan lab, something for which there is no evidence, literally. And even the rest of the intelligence community says that it's almost certainly not the case. And yet this is being hyped up in the American media and by our government, both parties, in order to demonize China the way they have demonized Putin and Russia. Am I being heard okay now? Okay.
Yes, yes.
So, okay, good. So, of course, all of this attack on China completely ignores the reality of the miracle that's been conducted in China over these last decades. A miracle unprecedented in human history. 800 million people were lifted out of poverty. The most massive infrastructure development program ever seen in the world. Could only be compared to what Franklin Roosevelt did during the 1930s to save America from a depression. But it goes far beyond that, in fact. And then, of course, China taking this process of massive infrastructure development as a basis for lifting the well-being of the population, taking that process to the rest of the world through the Belt and Road Initiative. This is all ignored. Instead, China is condemned as the aggressor, as a threat to the United States, justifying even the preparation for war. So let's look at this from the overview from above. If you look at the global picture, on the one hand, you have the insanity of the US and British leadership trying to provoke a full-scale war on Russia, not a proxy war in Ukraine, but a full-scale war, which would quickly become nuclear. And you also have the general financial collapse of the Western financial system, the dollar-based Western system, which is now experiencing a collapse of hyperinflation. This, of course, didn't begin recently. It began actually over 50 years ago in 1971 when Richard Nixon took the dollar off of the gold standard and ended the Roosevelt economic policies and began a British policy of free market, free trade, allowing the banks to run the economy rather than the government. And this process, Mr. LaRouche warned at that time, would lead inevitably to a depression, to hyperinflation, to wars, maybe small wars at first, but a big war against the Soviet Union and China eventually. And that is what we're experiencing today. He warned that most people wouldn't want to hear that message, but that we had to stick to the truth, and that when it happened, people would look back to see who was lying and who was telling the truth. And I think that's what we're experiencing today with the surge of support for the ideas that LaRouche represents in the world. So these sanctions, the hyperinflation that we're experiencing throughout the world was aggravated enormously when the US imposed massive sanctions on Russia, which ended the flow of oil and gas and other materials, fertilizer, food, and so forth, from Russia, mainly to Europe. So that these policies were policies that did far, far more damage to Europe than to Russia. And of course, ending the flow of cheap Russian gas to Europe, which was, as you all know, aggravated enormously by the recent blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline by the United States, as Cy Hirsch has exposed. A policy, an act of war, an act of terrorism by the US government against not only Russia, but against our so-called allies like Germany and other European countries that needed that cheap gas in order to sustain their population, the populations which are now suffering from economic deterioration at a very, very rapid rate. While the US is enjoying the sale of its LNG to Europe at 4 times the price that was being paid to Russia for their cheap gas. So the other benefit of these sanctions on Russia was revealed by Mr. Blinken. You all know Mr. Blinken, the lunatic who happens to be our foreign secretary, who admitted that what he called a silver lining to the end of the supply of Russian oil and gas to Europe, which was, he said, that we would have to more rapidly transfer our use of fossil fuels to so-called renewables under the guise of the fake science known as climate change and global warming. So this was intentional. What they did knowing full well it would have a devastating impact on our own populations. Nonetheless, that was what they did, and that's why they did it, because they wanted to stop fossil fuels and carbon. But now, looking down from above again, the reality is that while this danger is extremely real, it could lead to the extermination of the human race, literally, if there were a nuclear war. And yet, the world as a whole is moving in the other direction. Almost the entirety of the rest of the world are on the side of Russia and China and India and others who are committed to development rather than war. Most of the rest of the so-called global South has refused to go along with the attacks on Russia. They certainly refuse to decouple from China, as is being demanded by the US leadership and the British leadership, because they prefer development through the Belt and Road to war and to austerity. And now, as you may know, there are at least a dozen or more countries who want to join with the BRICS. That includes major countries like Indonesia, Argentina, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and more. They know where the future lies, if there's going to be a future. And it lies with the East, and it lies with the Belt and Road and the development process that's being launched largely through Russia and China. And as I hope your newspapers have reported, there is finally the emergence of an anti-war movement in the West. It began with a rally which we played a hand, the LaRouche movement played a significant role in organizing an anti-war demonstration at the Lincoln Memorial on the 19th of February, which had about 3,000 people on site and some 60 to 70,000 people watching online. That forum began with a video from Helga Zepp LaRouche. It was organized to a great extent by both right-wing and left-wing organizations who were quite proud of the fact that the so-called right and the so-called left were working together. Because if you're facing a war policy, and especially the threat of a nuclear war, then the differences between the different political organizations paled to insignificance. And what matters is uniting your voices, both within the country and internationally, to demand an end to the madness of this war policy, both the war going on today and the danger of a provoked global war against Russia and China. So the other speaker at this conference from our organization was Diane Sayer. Some of you probably saw that Mentong held a conference a few weeks ago which featured Diane as one of the speakers. She gave a very profound speech at this event. Others from across the board, 3 former Congress people spoke. So this was an expression that it's time to put an end to the madness of the war policy. And then the following week, last weekend, you had dramatic outpouring of support in Europe, especially in Germany, where 50,000 people came out for an anti-war march at the Brandenburg Gate. Other demonstrations across the other cities of Germany, in France, in Italy, and even in the UK, even in the British, at the heart of the beast, the British Empire in London, there was a rally against the war policy. So this is very promising. It's only the beginning, but it's very promising. It shows the direction and the fact that people are being faced with the economic barbarism of sanctions policies against not only Russia, but against Syria, for instance, a country that has been devastated by 10 years of war, 12 years of war, and then an earthquake. And yet the US refuses to lift their sanctions, their devastating sanctions, which are preventing even the attempt to save the people trapped under the rubble from the earthquake, let alone to rebuild the country destroyed by the years of war in which the US was openly supporting the terrorist organizations to bring down the Assad government. So, as Helga says, this is a moment where every single human being is threatened by this danger of economic disillusion and by the threat of a nuclear war. And therefore, every citizen has to see himself and herself as a world citizen, not just a citizen of their nation, and that there's no distinction between being a patriot of your nation and a citizen of the world, and especially at a moment in which the world as a whole is threatened with this kind of destruction. And on the economic crisis, I should conclude by saying that one of the closest friends of Lyndon LaRouche in Russia was their leading economist, Sergei Glaziev. And Mr. Glaziev, now working closely with people in China and others in the BRICS countries, is putting together a new global financial system, a system meant only for trade, not to replace currencies, but following a policy that LaRouche proposed in the year 2000 called trade without currency, toward a basket of hard commodities. The idea is to form a trade currency whose value is determined not by the speculators on Wall Street or the City of London, but is determined by the value of the hard commodities, of gold, but also oil and gas, minerals, and so forth, in order to tie the value of trade to the actual process of production. So this is in place already. It's already being tested. It's a way of allowing nations to get out from under the dollar altogether, because it's by the fact that most of world trade is done in dollars that the US has used that as an excuse to impose their sanctions on literally dozens and dozens of countries. So this is something that we all need to know about and that we all need to support. So I'll close with that. I thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to hearing from the other esteemed guests.
Thank you very much for your eloquent analysis and your courageous views. We would like to give him time for a few questions because he is in the US now in Geneva. It's past 9 p.m. at night. Maybe we could ask you a few questions before we anyone here from the media will ask questions. There's a question here. Answer might be thought. What are your advices to President Bongbong Marcos and the political leaders of the Philippines? How can the Philippines react to this request of the US to add more military bases in the Philippines? Do you see the Philippines as a danger of the next Ukraine at that time for war against the rival of USA? Any advice you would like to give to our leaders today?
Was that a question to me?
Yes.
Yes?
A question for you, sir.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand the question very well. I think it was there any advice?
What advices would you give to Philippine political leaders like President Marcos and other politicians of the Philippines about the expansion of American military bases in the Philippines?
Mr. Mike Billington, I think the question is about what is your advice to the president of the Philippines at the moment, given that the Americans are requesting for 4 additional EDCA bases, or what you call, well, US bases precisely, to be installed in the Philippines in addition to the 5 existing EDCA bases. That's, I think, the meat of the question, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yes. No, I think this is an extremely unfortunate. Like I said, I'd rather have your experts address the issues domestically, but I will say from the overview of the danger the world is facing right now, the US obviously wants to form an anti-China coalition, a military coalition in Asia in preparation for their planned war on China. And they are trying, as I'm sure you know, they're trying to use Taiwan the way they used Ukraine, to try to build up a anti-mainland hysteria in Taiwan, and to provoke military, to provide, they're actually sending more military forces to Taiwan with the effort of trying to provoke a military confrontation with the mainland. And the idea of the Philippines, rather than its initial move towards, with Mr. Marcos going to China and signing some development deals with the Belt and Road, but instead of that, allowing an expansion of the US military bases in the Philippines, of the Philippines forming a military bloc with the Japanese, which could go badly. We'll see, not necessarily, but it could. These are not good signs, especially if you're looking at it in the context of the US, some of the madmen running the US at this point. And this is not the overall sentiment of the American people, although the media demonization of China is enormous. So it has an effect, but this can be defeated. Many, many American businessmen know that China's Belt and Road and collaboration between China and the US is the only way of getting the US out from under its rapid descent into economic disintegration. So in that sense, I think the effort to use the military threat of China, which doesn't exist, there's no threat, but the use of that is economic in scope, as well as extremely dangerous in terms of the security of all of Asia, which would be devastated if there were a war.
Mike Billington, thank you very much. We'd like to now invite the other speakers for their opening statement. Thank you again, Mr. Mike Billington. You can stay and join us for rest also, but we appreciate very much your words and analysis. Next, we'd like to invite Mr. Ado Pagdinawa. He is with the Reservistas of FICA, also Vice President for External Affairs of the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies think tank. Mr. Ado Pagdinawa, for your opening statement.
I have chosen a unique approach to this statement. What kind of a president would risk the good standing of his country with a friendly neighbor that just a few weeks ago he said was our strongest partner in development? Mr. Marcos is an ambassador of another country on the basis of this information that was hatched by who could be dropped out of the Philippine Military Academy, and whose claim to fame is his alleged closeness to a foreign associate justice who in turn is a rabid promoter of xenophobia in our country and a certified bootlicker of the Americans. You have the entire intelligence community at the click of your finger, yet you want that the equipment that our Coast Guard men. An active AFP general told me that if it were a military-grade Navy, hindi naman sila mahuhulat pa sa tala. Masusunog po ang kanilang mga mukha. It would not have just blinded them, but their faces will be burned. Jay Taniela is a CG-1 and is the Commodore in charge of personnel. Philippine Coast Guard Commander Admiral Artemio Abu suddenly gave him an ad hoc title of Advisor for Maritime Security and spokesman for the West Philippine Sea in order to legitimize his profile. But these items are not reflected in the plantilla of the Philippine Coast Guard in the Department of Budget and Management. Besides, this action goes over the heads, Mr. Abu, your Deputy Chief for International Affairs, Commodore Algir Recasfrente, and the official PCG spokesman in the person of Commodore Armando Badillo, who the media is very familiar with, the commander for PCG Public Affairs Office. Mr. Marcos, it appears that just like your other cabinet departments, your Coast Guard is in a serious disarray. May I inform you that the Philippines does not have an updated official map. Our map is still based on the 1898 Treaty of Paris and the 1900 Treaty of Washington. I know this because I used to work for the Foreign Service of this country. This is why, based on a study of a credible, this time Supreme Court Associate Justice Francis Hardereta, and international law experts Dr. Melissa Loja and Professor Romel de Galato Bagares, a law has been proposed amending Republic Act 9522, the current baseline law, to specifically add the names and identify the maritime features in the West Philippine Sea claimed or occupied by the Philippines. So for your continuing education, Mr. Marcos, under international law, legislation is an act of sovereignty that establishes territorial title. This is necessary because the West Philippine Sea was only created by President Noynoy Aquino under Mir Administration Order Number 29, Series of 2012. The Hardereta proposed law also states that provisions of Presidential Decree 1596, which was the historic act of your father legislating by the Kalayaan Island Group, Republic Act 3046 of 1961 on baseline, as amended by Republic Act 5446 of 1968 and Republic Act 9522 of 2009, 3 years before the arbitral decision, and all other laws, decrees, executive orders, rules, judgments, and issuances inconsistent shall be amended or modified accordingly. It also states that the National Mapping and Resource Information Authority, NAMRIA, shall produce and publish charts and maps of the Philippines reflecting amended baseline within 6 months of its enactment and effectivity. So, Mr. Marcos, please ask Admiral Abu what lawful coordinates in longitudes and latitudes our Coast Guard uses in patrolling the so-called West Philippine Seas. Actually, I am no longer surprised that often the Chinese thinks that your people are often lost at sea or included in their longitudes and latitudes. We cannot base our decisions on mere propaganda. That Tariana released when he said, quote, China continues to ignore the Philippines' legal ownership of our EEC over Ayungin Shoal. They continue to assert ownership of the area. Ayungin Shoal is ours, unquote. Without an amended Philippine baseline law and an updated Philippine map. This reduces to a wild hyperventilation of a PMA rapid testosterone alone on board. Besides, why is Admiral Abu's Coast Guard engaging in politics? This is urgent because the Americans are using lawfare and information war like this to mislead you that we need 4 additional EDCA bases for them in positions acting as fallacy aimed at China's direction. Coming from Ilocos Norte, this should instead be giving you sleepless nights if you care for your constituents. In fact, we do not need EDCA. We do not even need the Mutual Defense Treaty, and more so. On what basis will you conduct joint patrols? Why? I do not know about you, Mr. President, but the Philippines has no enemy. And so, in your own words, why do we need an armory? Thank you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Ato Pagkitawa. Next, a very interesting speaker, Mr. Yoti de Guzman is a very respected, courageous labor leader. He is Chairman Emeritus of the Bukloran ng Manggagawa Pilipino, also leader of Partido ng Lakas ng Masa, and more important, he has made history as the first socialist presidential candidate in Philippine history. Siya pinakaunang kandidatong sosyalista para pagka-Pangulo last election. He is similar to Lula of Brazil. Maybe he will become a future senator or another important national leader. Let us welcome Yoti de Guzman para sa opening statement niya.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. May isang taon na tayo pinagsasamantalahan, niloloko ng gobyerno ng Amerika. Yung una, milyon ang pinagpapatay sa atin para makontrol ng Pilipinas, maagong sa Kastila. Pagkatapos doon, daang bilyon, trilyong halaga ng ating yaman ang kailang kinurako. At nagawa nila yan sa magitan ng pambabraso o pakikipagsapwatan sa nagpapalit-palit nating gobyerno. Ito yung ating kalagayan ngayon. Isa na tayo sa pinakamahirap na bansa sa buong mundo. Dati, pumapakalawa po tayo. Pero ngayon, sansan na. At bukod doon sa kanilang pinagagawa, ngayon ay nakibintong sa tayo sa pagkapulbos ng ating bansa. Gawin po sa kanyang intensyon na pigilan pag-unlad ng China. Gusto niyang i-impose ang kanyang kapangyarihan, hegemonya, sa buong daigdig. At nang nararamdaman niya, nalalampasan siya ng China, kadami-kali, gusto niyang kontrolin ito sa magitan ng giyera. Dapat tayong mga Pilipino, yung mamayan, mga manggagawa ay hindi na pumayag yan. Kaya rin natin ang ginagawa ng ibang mamayan sa Europa na ngayon ay nag-aalsa para pigilan ang giyera. Walang nananalo sa giyera, mga kasama. Ang nananalo lang sa giyera ay ang mga gumagawa ng armas at ang mga malaking korporasyon sa construction. Sila ang nagpapaypay ng giyera. Ang mga imperialista, sila ang makikinabang sa giyera. Huwag natin hayaan na mangyari sa Pilipinas ang nangyari sa Ukraine na ginamit ng NATO, ng NATO at sa Amerika upang mag-expand papuntang east. Nabagin ang kanyang mga kasunduan with Russia dahil sa kanilang intensyon na pigilin ang umuunlad na ekonomiya ng China at Russia. Huwag tayo pumayag na tayo ay mag-import dahil kapag nangyari mga kasama, ang giyera, kahit hindi umuntong sa Third World War, ang Pilipinas ang magiging battlefield. Ang Pilipinas ang magiging battlefield ng giyera kung matuloy ang provokasyon na ginagawa ng Amerika ng Quad laban sa China. Tayo magiging battlefield. At malalasap natin ang tulad na nalasap ng Ukraine. Ngayon, napaplaten ang syudad ng Ukraine, baong sa utang ang bansang Ukraine sa Amerika at kontrol ng Amerika ngayon ang supply ng gas sa buong Europe. Kumikita ng limpak-limpak na pera ang Amerika hindi lamang sa pagbenta ng armas, kundi pagkontrol na ekonomiya ng Ukraine at ng buong Europe. Pinagawa niya sa pagitan ng pagpapasabog ng pipeline ng Russia to Europe na dating pinagdadaluyan ng natural gas. Yan po ang intensyon ng Amerika. Ang panatilihin ang kanyang paghahari sa buong mundo. Economically, politically. At ginagamit niya ang kanyang bentay sa armas para gawin ito. Walang pagtatangi, walang pagkonsidera sa magiging kainatnan ng mga mamayang mamamatay sa giyera tulad ng namatay ng mga mamayang ng Ukraine. Kaya tama at ako'y nakikisa sa panawagan ng organisasyon ito na US bases out dyan, Mutual Defense Treaty and EDCA, ayaw namin sa digmaan at ng bombang nuklear, kapayapaan, hindi digmaan at bombang nuklear. Yung lamang at maraming salamat sa inyo.
Maraming salamat sa galing na leader si Carlo Di Cruzpan. Magtanong tayo ng mga tanong mamaya. Last but not the least, we have another speaker, si RJ Abigana, President siya ng WARM, UFC, United Filipino Consumers and Commuters Group. Para sa opening statement, si Professor Anna, si RJ Abigana, second to most speaker, opening statement.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Ako po yung kumakatawan din sa Philippine Peace and Solidarity Council kasama rin po yung iba pa mga organisasyon tulad po ng Pilipino Patriotiko na sumusuporta sa panawagan na ito. Kasama rin po yung grupo ng makabansa at siyempre yung katutunan ng demokratikong Pilipino sa Pilipino. Ang mga organisasyon ating nabanggit, kagaya po ng Philippine Peace and Solidarity Council, ay naghahanda ng mga malawak na kilos, hindi lamang po dito sa Metro Manila, kung hindi mismo po dun sa mga bagong mga tinitignan na base militar sa ilalim po ng EDCA, tulad po ng Isabela, ay nagpaplano kami ng maliliit na mga konferensya at kakayanan ng mga mass actions. Ganito rin po sa Cagayan, Zambales, yung Biclang Luzon, yung mga probinsya dahil o kung sa Southern Tagalog, at ilang bahagi po ng Mindanao at Visayas. Ito po yung panawagan ng mga peace advocates na sa laman ng gusto. Ayaw po ng mga samahan ito, nating mga Pilipino, yung migrasyon ginawa ng ating pinakamataas na leader ng bansa. Una, denial na po yung sinasabing independent foreign policy. Ito po yung malinaw na katraiduran at kapaksilan sa kanyang sinumpang tungkulin. Ikalawa po, malinaw din ang asal sa ating sarigang batas, yung local provisions ng ating sarigang batas. At ikatlo, yung ipagtanggol niya ng mga Pilipino at Ileo sa kapahamuhan ay sinabi nga ng ating na hinihigop tayo ng EDCA ng Mutual Defense Treaty NATO. Itong mga Visiting Forces Agreement na hinihigop tayo sa gera na hindi naman natin gera na wala namang kinalaman ng mga Pilipino. Ang problema ng mga Pilipino ngayon, tulad ng mga manggagawa, ano po, pambayad sa kuryente ay napakamahal. Pambayad sa tubig, mahal ka. Kung yung usapin nga ng audio, hanggang ngayon, hindi pa masettle. Pumasok pa dito sa tinatawag na sigalot, no? Dito sa pensyon na nililikha ng mga imperialista na Estados Unidos dito sa Taiwan. Very obvious kung bakit pinili yung 4 na lugar dito sa Northern Luzon. Hindi naman yan nakaharap talaga dun sa sinasabing debate at problema natin dyan sa karagatan. Hindi nakaharap ito dun sa Taiwan Strait. Para kanino yun, yung interest niya. So gagamitin po tayong shield na nitong imperialista ng Estados Unidos para tayo po ng mga bomba. Hindi naman natin kaaway ang Russia, hindi naman natin kaaway ang China. Kaya gusto natin ay ekonomiya. Hindi base militar, hindi EDCA. Ang kailangan natin ekonomiya palaguin, trabaho, kapayapaan, kalusugan, pagkain, problema ng commuters, problema ng base of ng mga jeep. Yan yung mga dapat na inatukan, hindi itong EDCA na ito na sigurado po at tayo ay target na. Hindi natin alam. Bukas, baka mapindot yung buto na yan, sigurado po, ang babagsakan natin yung sinasabing MAD. Ano yung MAD? Mutually Assured Destruction. Walang panalo sa bomba nuklear. Lahat tayo talo. Kaya isang barbarikong hambang ang ginagawa ng mga imperialista na tayo ay ginagawa sangkalan sa problema nito. Ang gusto natin ay kooperasyon, partnership, kapayapaan, isang momentong nuklear. Yan po yung ating mga panawagan at lumayo tayo dito sa mga pagighan ng tensyon na ito. Kung gusto ng Presidente ng Pilipinas na sumabak na sa tensyon na yan, siya na lang. Huwag na tayo itamay. No? Lahat ng mga utak pulpura sa palasyo, yung mga oligarko na sumusuporta sa mga linya na ito, ilayo tayo nito. Gusto natin pagkain, kalusugan, gamot, trabaho. Yan ang gusto natin, papayapaan. Muli, itanyayahan po kayo ng PPSC, ng UFCC, ng ADP at iba pa
Namatali po kayo ng white ribbon. White ribbon po sa inyong mga bahay. Simbolo po na pagtuto natin sa MDT at EDCA, no? Para sa kapayapaan. Ano po, magtali po tayo. Kaya po, wala po rin sa muling delivery. Meron mga white ribbons. At po yan doon sa Boy Scout of the Philippines, sa may pumaskuran po sa kagat. Pagkatapos nito, may magmamarcha po yung ating grupo at po doon, unang exalto, panawagan ng kapayapaan, hindi gera, kapayapaan, hindi EDCA, kapayapaan, hindi MDT, kapayapaan, hindi Visiting Forces Agreement. Muli, imperialismo ay bagsak. Imperialismo ay bagsak. Pang-militar na salop, talagang salop. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much to the passionate and eloquent Mr. RJ Alexander. Next, last but not the least, usually ladies first, but in this case, a very important speaker will be us for opening statement. Professor Ana Malindogoy, by Zoom, nasa pagkakas siya studying Vice President for External Affairs, Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies, think tank, and also a very well-known geopolitics analyst and politics analyst. For your opening statement, Professor Ana Malindogoy. May we request?
Yes, Wilson, can I be heard? Clarado ba? Clarado, no? Okay, thank you. Clarado naman siguro ang boses ko, no? At maraming salamat, Wilson, for that very generous introduction. Siguro I'll speak in English. Probably later you can possibly translate in Tagalog just for the sake of our media friends and our international friends who are also watching both via live stream and also through the Zoom, also in the Zoom. So let me start. Friends and colleagues, our dear media friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like to express my sincere opposition to the militarization of the Philippines through the full implementation of EDCA for the wills and caprices of the United States together with its allies in the Asia-Pacific region. The likes of Japan, of course, is an ally of the United States and beyond the region in preparation for the war that the US has been trying to orchestrate for the longest time now against our neighbor, China. This war that the US has been trying to instigate for the longest time, worst comes to worst, will be at the expense of our country and Asia. The ramification of this impending war between the two superpowers will be fatal and most devastating to any countries that Uncle Sam will use as a proxy. Sadly, our beloved Philippines is one in the running to be a proxy if in any case a military confrontation breaks out either in the Taiwan Strait or in the disputed South China Sea. Nevertheless, I'm praying fervently that all this will not happen and that we will rise as a nation to oppose such an evil plan of the empire. As a nation, we should not leave our fate to an imperialist and colonizer that has been bleeding and disrespecting the country's sovereignty, if there's still any of that this time around, since colonial times until now. To be used as a proxy and to be a new colony of the United States is not a joke. This basically means that as a nation, we are not truly independent and sovereign. This means our fate as a nation is not ours, but controlled by an empire, and this is the saddest realization for every Filipino. Mga kabansa, we are in the most dangerous geopolitical and economic situation since 1945. We're facing a world where for any possible miscalculation in the three flashpoints in our region, namely the disputed South China Sea, Taiwan Strait, and the Korean Peninsula, the world will be on the brink of World War III. And mind you, this impending war will not be the same kind of war humanity has experienced before. It will be most catastrophic and fatal. In this regard, as members of the international community and as a nation who will be directly affected by this impending war, if this happens, I really hope not. I really hope not. We have the responsibility to oppose this evil plan of the empire and spare us and the rest of the world from sufferings and fatalities that a war may bring to the world, to our region, Asia, and most importantly, to the beloved Philippines. As a nation, we should learn from the experience of Ukraine, and we should not just sit down and wait for this country to be burned into ashes like Ukraine. We only have one country, the Philippines, and it is but the responsibility of each Filipino to fight for his country's survival to exist against an imperial power that is trying to use it as a pawn and a proxy for its own purposes, caprices, and own agenda. If we will not oppose the evil plan of the empire as a nation, who will do this for us then? That's the question that each Filipino should reflect on. This is the question that we as Filipinos must reflect, contend with, and act before it's too late. Time is of the essence, and it's ticking. Again, the Ukraine crisis is a hybrid proxy war between the United States and its NATO allies against Russia. What happened before the actual Ukraine crisis and Russia's special operation in Ukraine is happening and taking place now in the Philippines. The same playbook that the United States used in Ukraine is currently operational in the Philippines. Not exactly the same in all aspects, but the outcome will be similar in every respect, and that's the Philippines will end up the collateral damage, the proxy, the pawn, and the newly acquired military asset of the US in its planned war against China with the sole purpose of containing China for the empire to maintain its hegemony and supremacy in the world that is evolving into a multipolar one. Mga kabansa, imagine our country has been reduced by the United States as a military asset, disrespecting our sovereignty and independence as a nation state. This is a colossal insult to the Philippines and the Filipinos beyond imagination. But I guess the critical question for most Asians and Filipinos in particular is, would we allow the empire to succeed in their wicked plans at our expense? Would we allow a military crisis or a war to take a foothold in our relatively peaceful Asia-Pacific region? Well, personally, I say no. As a nation and Filipinos, we should say no to the glaring US neocolonialism of the Philippines. We should say no to the full implementation of EDCA and the 4 EDCA bases facing Taiwan and near the disputed South China Sea. We should say no to the enhanced joint patrol in the West Philippine Sea between the US, Australia, Japan, and the Philippines, provoking our giant neighbor China. This is a recipe for disaster in the disputed waters. We should say no to deployment of more US troops and military assets on Philippine soil. We should say no to the triad military alliance or pact between the Philippines, Japan, and the United States, targeting China. This is a Cold War tactic and a black confrontation being staged by the Americans at our expense as a country. Mga kabansa, worst comes to worst, if things go wrong and a war in the Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific region breaks out, again, the Philippines will end up a collateral damage. And this war will devastate us beyond our imagination. Hence, we should not allow ourselves and our country to be used as a pawn or a proxy of the US chess match with China. We should learn from the mishaps of the Ukrainians and their puppet President Zelensky. Again, the Ukraine crisis is a hybrid proxy war between Russia and the US alongside its NATO allies. And Ukraine is the pawn. Now, the question for Filipinos is this: do we want our country to end up like Ukraine? Do we want a repeat of the Ukraine crisis in Asia? Do we want to be the next Ukraine in Asia? I hope the answer for each and every Filipino will be no. I really hope not. Again, real talk dictates that as a country, the Philippines needs to be on the side of peace and must exert all efforts not to be dragged into any military conflict, not our own making and not within the core national interest of the Philippines, which is, if in any case, this will be detrimental to the existence and survival of the country, if in any case, the Philippines will be dragged into that war. And I hope even that war will never happen, because that is not good for the whole humanity in this regard. Filipinos and Asians alike must be mindful of the fact that peace is an essential precondition to economic progress and development. Without peace, economic progress is not possible. Ukraine crisis is a living testament that wars, conflict can easily wipe out all sorts of economic development and progress achieved not only by the two players at the moment, Ukraine and Russia, but all countries across the globe. In war, again, as has been said by our distinguished speakers in this forum, there are no winners, only losers when you talk about war. As Filipinos and Asian, I implore you, my fellow Filipinos and Asians, to stand on the side of peace and to say no to a proxy war that the empire is planning to stage on our side of the world, in our region, Asia. Mga kabansa, the path to peace creates security and stability, and we achieve economic prosperity through peace and stability. I really hope that we will join our hands and stand against this evil plan. EDCA is just one of the instruments, and I hope our country will learn the lessons of Ukraine. The experience of Ukraine. I really hope so. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, thank you for the opportunity extended to me. And I really hope that you will join also in the Peace March after this forum. Thank you, and mabuhay po tayong mga Pilipino. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, for your opening statement. Now let's go to the question and answer forum with the media or guests watching via Zoom, Facebook Live. One of the first questions here, what are your reactions, another reaction in your to the Senate public hearing on March 1, where Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Senator Amy Marcos was raising the disturbing questions directed at Defense Secretary Galvez and Foreign Secretary Manalo on why all the four proposed new U.S. military bases all in the northern region near Taiwan. Why not in the western region of the Philippines when they are here to be security guards for the Philippines? What are your reactions to the question of Senator Amy Marcos, Senator Bato de la Rosa, you can tell? Ano reaction ninyo?
Question could be Ito ang konstitusyon. At ang forces under the present leadership of Harry Congress, the Department of Foreign Affairs under Secretary Enrique Marano, are not transparent to the public, and you, the media, must demand that transparency from them, because they have been acting as if they have been elected. These people, future of your children and your grandchildren, with the possibility of the extreme that they may be used in the future. So sa lahat ng ako ang siya. Dahil sa Nueva Ecija na nasama na ng isang lista sa Nueva Ecija, ayaw na nila ang base sa laon.
Thank you.
Ang mga kasano, basta kayo, pagka may base militar, sa inyong lugar.
Thank you very much. Dr. Binowa. Baka may gusto po ba si Carlo Bill? Anong reaction niyo kay Senator Amy, kay mga ibang senador sa matapang nilang mga tanong? Nandiyo hindi ko sa kanya.
Pwede mo gobyerno sa sa pagsuporta dun sa mga pag-pilit na ng Marcos isa na dati pabaliktad after ng visit sa US. People militar ay igalong sumunod kasi alam naman natin ang ating militar ay made of America. Dahil yan, made sa Amerika yan. Kaya tutulak na nila yung pagsuporta sa anong plano ng Amerika laban sa China. Ang pagagawa ng namin talaga ay ito. Yung ating mga ginagawang pag-panawot sa aking panawag. Dahil sa video at mga video ay ang Pilipinas. Yan ang phone. Pero tayo sa Pilipinas, ang magiging phone, hindi yung mga opisyal ng gobyerno na didesisyon. Ang magiging phone dito ay tayo na mga kahihirap. Tayo mga mawalang trabaho, tayo mga mamayan. Ang magiging phone, yung mga kahiyaman, bakit po ito yung hindi magliliparan na. Tayo bumiyahe. Kaya tayo magiging actually yung phone. At lahat ng nagmahalas o sektor kaya gera kapag po ay nagtatigan. Kaya walang ibang aasahan. Hindi ang gobyerno, hindi ang Senado, hindi ang Preso, hindi ang Palakayan, kundi tayo ng mamayan ang mag-ingay at mag-pinsa sa ating mga mamayan na tutulan ang mga ginagawa ng gobyerno. Yung ginagawa ng mga probinsya na pagputol sa usapan pag-alala ng life down ay alaganapin natin. Hindi lamang po sa kailang mga probinsya kundi gawin ito ng buong mamayan sa ating bansa parang pinigistro at malakas na pagtutol natin sa pakikipagsabwatan sa Amerika para sulbusin yung ating nag-iisang bansa.
Maraming salamat.
Wilson.
Thank you.
Wilson, may reaction.
Short translation for foreign media watching us. The courageous labor leader said, if war explode in this region, the real faults will be the workers and ordinary people, not the officials, not the elites, because they could escape easily by playing to their other homes. But while the masses, ordinary people, will become the real pawns of the war. So we have to join the peace movement, anti-war movement. Thank you, Mario.
Wilson.
That was a question. May question doon may microphone na pwede abot doon. May babae doon na bigyan nakapalan na.
Wilson.
Please state your name for the benefit of the families.
Good afternoon po. I'm Kayla Kaya.
Yes.
Actually, yung latest speaking sabi ko ni Secretary Galvez paghapon, despite daw kung mga opposition against EDCA, plano ng government na i-maximize ang pagtatayo ng mga bagong EDCA sites sa bansa. Ano yung reaction?
Despite the opposition,
Si Secretary Galvez, di mo ba dating general? Tama po ba? Paalala ko lang po kay Sariling Galvez yung sinabi ng isa sa pinakaunang general ng ating bansa. Ito po si General Linda. Para sa kanya ang mensahe na ito, ito ang sagot. Ang pamamahaway ng mga Pilipino ay ang sarili niya. Secretary Galvez, ito po yung may problema. Hindi tayo mga Pilipino. Number one, hindi siya nagbabasa ng saligang batas. Hindi niya binabasa ang independent foreign policy yan ibabasa. Andiyan po yung sa Constitution. Ikalawa, hindi rin niya binabasa yung nuclear free provision. Ang linaw po niyan. Ibig sabihin, yung general na yan, may kalituhan yan sa pag-iisip. May problema siya sa sarili niya mismo. Gusto niya tayong ituhin at hati-hatiin at gawin tayong sunuran sa kanyang among imperialista. Malinaw po yan. Ano po? Kaya wag po tayo magpabola dyan sa kalihim yan. Ang dapat na gawin niya, mag-resign na siya kung meron siyang natitira pa ang kahihiyan sa bayan ng Pilipino. Dahil pag pumutok po ang digmaan nuklear, kahit ng mga mayayaman niya, kahit mga oligarko niya, sumakay sa mga aeroplano nila, aabutan niya ng bomba nuklear. Titira sa mundo. Yung pinag-uusapan natin dito, kaya yung mga ganyan tao, mga walang hiyayan. Wala mga puso yan, hindi yung mga Pilipino, hindi mga sinatay po sa ating bansa. Dapat na si Galvez at yung kanya mga kasama kampol, mag-resign na. Dahil yan ay kulang katrayturan at kasinungalingan sa atin. Yan po yung ating sagot. Ilipin niya na lang yung statement ni General Luna at dagdag ko, yung Artikulo 1, dapat gamitin yan. Salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. Abeliana. Mr. RJ Abeliana. Si Professor Ana Balindog Uy, I assume gusto niya sumagot about tanong ni Beria of Manila Times. Paging Miss Ana Balindog Uy.
Okay, can you hear me?
Or analysis?
Okay, quick reply lang at saka reaction dun sa Senate EDCA. Oo. Naririnig naman ako. Oo, naririnig ako, no, Wilson. Oo. Okay. Pagdating kasi dyan sa usapin ng EDCA, dapat kasi before pa mag-push through ang ating gobyerno, lalo na ang executive level, dapat naman siguro, magkonsultahan muna sila. There should be a consultation among people kung ano ba ang pulso, what's the pulse of the whole Philippines and Filipinos pagdating sa usapin ng EDCA, especially when you talk about the full implementation. Nabasa ko na ngayon lang sa news kasi ina-update din ako ng mga kaibigan natin sa media na parang pupunta ata sa United States. Wait, let me check exactly yung report from the CNN. Na parang ang sinasabi, Philippines and the United States officials set to meet in April to talk about the improvements of the Philippines-US ties, including the possibility of a joint patrols in the South China Sea. And I think that's including yung tinatawag mong full implementation ng EDCA or i-renew ba o hindi, yung mga ganong usapin. Ang tanong kasi dito sa usapin ng EDCA, ano yan eh, it should be something that the people should be consulted. Kasi kapag nagkaroon ng gitgitan sa dalawang nag-uumpugang malalaking bato, ang kawawa kasi dyan tayo, mga Pilipino at ang Pilipinas. Now, dapat bigyan nila ng diin kung ano ang pulso ng bayan tungkol dyan. I-subject nila yan sa open debate and public debate. Kasi in every possible way, lahat tayo apektado. Pero ang problema, wala nga eh. Biglaan na nga lang na, uy, okay na pala yan, done deal na pala. So yun yung problema. Na-appreciate ko pala ang ginawang Senate hearing ni Senator Amy Marcos. At ngunit doon sa Senate hearing, napansin ko lang na nagsalita si Governor Mamba at sinabi nga niya na may pumunta sa kanya ang US Embassy, pakasama ilang military men at saka yung iba pang official ng US Embassy. Pero wala akong narinig galing sa ating mga officials of government ang nang reaction against that. Take note, that was harassment and bullying against an elected official of the country. Sa sarili nating bansa, sa sarili nating lupa. Walang reaction. There's no reaction coming from government official, even from the president himself. Tapos, mabilis ang reaction kapag disputed South China yung pinag-uusapan. Ito sarili mong bansa sa loob ng territory mo, harassing ang government elected official, Governor Mamba. Wala akong narinig na news, wala rin akong narinig na opposition to that by any of the government, especially high-ranking government officials. Why is that? Ganun na ba talaga tayo? I mean, wala na ba tayong sarili nating bait at para hindi tayo magkaroon ng reaction to this kind of, actions against our own people? Yun yung mga reactions ko. Nireview ko kasi at pinanood ko rin yung Senate hearing. And I appreciate actually Senator Amy for opening it to the public at yung discussion at level ng debate. Sana i-open ito sa public debate kasi ito naman ang necessary dapat. Thank you, Wilson, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Hello, Mike Fish. Actually, ano man napag-abrihan noong April 28, 2014, I sympathize with the armed forces of the Philippines. Dahil sa report ni Secretary Galvez, 21 existing EDCA projects. This is to answer the question. In 5 sites, ito po ang status. This is the status of the 21 existing EDCA projects. 5 were already completed. 9 are still ongoing. 7 has yet to start. I will repeat. 5 completed, 9 ongoing, and 7 have yet to start. However, alam po ninyo ang kausap natin dito napakapuso. At tahangang parang forces of the Philippines dahil 1 year before the 10-year period of EDCA, which should be on April 28, 2024. 1 year before 2024, mabubuksan na po ang opsyon ng Pilipinas or to terminate the agreement. So what they're trying to do here is trying to beat the clock para malihis sa August 28, 2023 at mabuksan ang option for a possible termination. Nakabitin po ang 9 ongoing projects and 7 that have yet to start. Pinugulangan na naman tayo ng mga puti. Kaya inat nila ang ate at humihingi pa sila ng Israel yes. So, di ba, napuntan sa apat na cases, hindi sa kanilang incompetence in completing the project in the 10-year period for which we, the Filipino people, in support of our armed forces of the Philippines, must hold the United States accountable for not completing these projects within the 10-year period and use for another 4 days. Matagal din po ako tumira sa Amerika, so I can read the American mind. They are upping the ante. So I do not blame our armed forces for worrying that these promised projects will not be completed. Because the present government don't decide for whatever reason. And the only reason is your dissent. The only reason your objection. The only reason is your rising the alarm against this repositioning of these bases for a possible nuclear attack on the Philippines. Because just as they are behaving in Ukraine, do not believe that these people who are capable of sabotaging the Nord Stream project is capable of empathy for the benefit of the national interest and for the greater majority of the Filipinos, most of whom are poor.
Maraming salamat. Very passionate. Ado, paglinawan. We would like to hear naman from Calio de Guzman. Yung tanong ni Miss Belia of Manila Times. Anong reaction daw ninyo na sabi ni Galvez kahit na may opposition, tuloy pa ang EDCA, military bases na napaka-controversial. Tama sabi ni Belia.
Tama. Meron. Tama yun. Tama, meron. Tama yun kasi sinabi ko nga kanina, yung gobyerno at yung militar, AFP, ay nandun na sa pagsuporta sa kung anumang programa ng Amerika dito. Kasi nga, sa mahabang panahon, mula naman noon hanggang sa ngayon, talagang kung hindi man pambabraso, talagang lahat ng ating gobyerno ay nagkampi sa Amerikano. Dahil doon sa ginera tayo, kaya kung hindi man binaraso, nag-support talaga sa Amerika. Despite ng katakot-takot na pagsasamantala, pagpatay, pagnanakaw, pandaraya, panlalamang na ginawa ng Amerikano sa ating bansa kung bakit tayo ganito. Kung totoong tutulungan tayo, kung totoo yung mga pinagsasabi nila sa lahat ng agreement na ating pinasok, mula Mutual Defense Treaty, LSMA, BFA, EDCA, lahat ng economic na kasunduan, kung totoong tayo tutulungan, bakit ganito tayo ngayon? Bakit ganito tayo kahirap? Bakit may 23 million na mga Pilipinong nakakaranas na hindi kumakain? Bakit mayroon 7 million na mga mamayang walang sariling bahay? Bakit meron tayong 4 million na mga manggagawang walang trabaho? Bakit ganito tayo kahirap? Kaya mga kasama, huwag tayong paloko na sa mga Amerikano at sa mga nasa gobyerno. Kasi yung dalawang yan, magkasabwat para pagsamantalahan ang ating bayan, ang ating Pilipinas na perlas ng silangan, ngayon ay magiging disyerto ng kahirapan ito, lalo na kapag nangyari ang ating kinatakutang gera sa pagitan ng Amerika o panggigera ng Amerika sa China para panatilihin yung kanyang hegemonya o kontrol o paghahari sa buong mundo.
Maraming salamat, Calio de Guzman, another very courageous nationalist leader. We have time for maybe one more question. One more question kasi the organizers want to go early to Boy Scout Circle for the Peace Rally. One more question from the media, yes. Microphone, pakiabot sa likod. Microphone. Maki-assist yung microphone. for our last question. Yes. Yes. Thank you. One more question. Yes. There's a question here. The next dito. What time what is the exact location of the peace rally that you will be having? Yes. Ang tanong nito, the different groups here will be going now after the Pandesal Forum sa Boy Scouts Memorial Circle Monument, Morato Avenue, corner ng Timog Avenue, Quezon City. Right after this. Pero lahat kayo may pandesal gift before going. So, since this is, we would like to request all the speakers for their closing statement. May tanong pa yata si Belia? Wala. To summarize your point and appeal to the leaders and to the public, is Mr. Billington still here or he has already left? Can we check if Mr. Billington there?
I'm
We
still here.
could invite him for closing statement.
He is here. He is here.
Yes.
Okay, yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We'd like to request Mr. Mike Billington for your closing statement to summarize your appeal about anti-war and peace, sir. Then picture also with.
Okay, thank you again for inviting me. Let me suggest that the anti-war rally that you're holding this evening and the movement that you're attempting to pull together here would benefit enormously by offering your support to the growing anti-war movements across the world. There are going to be demonstrations tomorrow across Australia. There are the rallies I mentioned to you before that we sponsored or helped sponsor at the Lincoln Memorial 2 weeks ago. And rallies in Germany, 50,000 people who came out in Germany. There's a petition by a member of Die Linke, the left party in Germany, whose name is Sarah Wagenknecht. She and an associate issued a petition against arming Ukraine, against the war. And they received 60 or 70,000 signatures on that petition. So there is a growing movement. And I think you would benefit by having them know that you have the beginning of a movement here in the Philippines against the very severe danger that's been carefully spelled out to you by each of your speakers today. I mean, it is a grave danger. This is a danger to the Philippines as a nation. But I think the more that you link this to the danger to every single human being who is being threatened by the outbreak of a full-scale war between the US and their British assets against Russia and China, that you will benefit, but they will benefit from knowing that you're doing this here, and that you expand the focus to be against these wars in general, not just the unfortunate problem that you're facing domestically because your president has chosen to link up with the US and the Japanese on these policies that could very well become part of a full-scale war against China and lead to devastation to all countries. But I'll close with that, and thank you for the invitation and for being here to hear your speakers.
As about the global movement for peace. We should link up with the anti-war groups. Thank you, Mr. Mike Billington of Executive Intelligence Review and La Roots Movement. He is also on Twitter. Next, maybe we'd like to invite Professor Ana Malindog Uy, because She was last earlier. Now we like to ask her for her closing statement. Then the three speakers here. Professor Ana Malindog Uy.
Okay,
to
thank
summarize your
you.
views.
Yes, thank you, Wilson. Thank you very much to everyone who attended this media forum. And again, there's a peace march. It's a peace march that will happen right after the forum, and everyone will be going there. And I hope everyone in Kamuning Bakery and even some of our friends who are in their social media will try to join this peace march. No, this is the beginning of a movement against war. I agree with Mr. Billington na dapat hindi lang tayo, no, dapat i-connect natin ang ating hinaing at ang ating aspiration against na anti-war, ang ating posisyon na anti-war sa mga iba't ibang bansa right now na nagkakandak sila ng mga peace rally at saka anti-war movements. Kasi ang usapin po ng gera ay hindi usapin lang ng Pilipinas, ito'y usapin ng buong mundo. Kasi kung magkakaroon man po ng escalation ang Ukraine crisis, it will escalate into something like a nuclear war. Wala pong maliligtas dyan. Lahat po tayo apektado kahit nandito tayo sa Asia. Now, if in any case there will be a military breakout in our side of the world, ay Diyos ko, dalawang parts ng mundo na po ang nasa bingit ng kamatayan. So dapat po makiisa tayo sa ating mga compatriots from different parts of the world lobbying and standing against war. Kasi ito po ay para sa buong mundo. Ito ay usapin ng buong mundo at hindi lang usapin ng Pilipinas. On the domestic level naman, I really hope that the President, President Bongbong Marcos will listen. I mean, yung usapin ng EDCA ay usapin ng buong Pilipinas at usapin ng mga Pilipino. So I really hope that he will subject this to a public debate. At tignan niya dapat ang kuro-kuro ng bawat Pilipino in this regard. Kasi lahat naman tayo concerned about dyan. At magkaring transparent din sa mga nangyayaring usapin between the United States and the Philippines when you talk about these issues. Kasi in-election ng Pilipino para i-guide ang Pilipinas at ilagay ang Pilipinas sa tamang daan at hindi para magkaroon tayo ng problemang malaki na ganito. Isa pa, ang war ay hindi natin kailangan. Ang kailangan natin economic development. Sa taas ng inflation ng Pilipinas, hindi ko alam paano tayo makasurvive niyan in a matter of time. Siguro, bigyan niya ng halaga kung ano ang kailangan ng Pilipinas at ano ang talaga ang core national interest natin. Sa tingin ko, hindi core national interest ng Pilipinas ang maging, proxy or pawn ng isang superpower against another major power na nasa loob pa ng Asia. I don't think that's our core national interest. So, I'm asking our fellow and each Filipino to think about these things and really to reflect on issues. Hindi lang dahil sa, may mga propaganda everywhere. We need to have our own voice and our own stand on these critical issues. Kasi at the end of the day, pag nagkalintikan, tayo din naman kawawa. Siyempre, pag wala kang ginawa, yun talaga yun. So, ang ano ko lang sa bawat Pilipino, makiisa po tayo sa buong mundo. Lalo na when you talk about anti-war movement. Kailangan po natin yan at maging responsable tayong members of the international community. And I really hope also that, the officials of this country will listen to different voices before making decisions. Kasi isang pagkakamali lang natin, problema malaki yan sa buong Pilipinas. At saka, ang independent foreign policy, ulitin, ito'y pinaka-importante. Sana naman tignan niya ng ating Pangulo, even in ASEAN, if you really look at ASEAN countries, look at Indonesia, what they're pursuing is an independent foreign policy. Hindi ka kailangan pumanig sa China or hindi ka kailangan pumanig sa United States. You have to be neutral or you have to pursue that independent foreign policy based on peace. Kasi that is the way forward. Bakit ngayon nagkaroon tayo ng pivot to United States out of the blue? So ganun yun So sana maibalik yung independent foreign policy na yan. And it's in the hands of the president. Because at the end of the day, the sole architect of our foreign policy is the president. Now, I really hope that he wakes up before it's too late. at before niya mailagay ang bansa sa critical na posisyon. Maraming salamat po at good luck sa Peace March at sana po ituloy-tuloy po ang movement sa Pilipinas na anti-war. Maraming salamat at magandang umaga sa lahat. Wilson.
Statement. Very eloquent as usual and very analytical. Before we proceed, may isang last na tanong dito sa media. Will the Peace March now be FB Live daw? Pakisabi lang, sana FB Live daw para the media can watch it also. Next, we'd like to invite Mr. Ado Paglinawan for the closing statement niya of the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. Vice President Ado Paglinawan.
Thank you. Foreign Affairs Secretary Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo said EDCA is a key pillar in the Philippine-US alliance. The full implementation of EDCA will make our alliance more resilient. Who are you speaking in behalf of, Secretary Manalo? Gusto ba ng Pilipinas? Does the Filipino want an alliance with the foreign power that has spent $6 to $7 trillion in the last 20 years spreading wars all over the world? Are you thinking correctly, Secretary Manalo? The priority policy of the Marcos Jr. administration is a post-pandemic economic recovery. I cannot reconcile how additional bases will hasten our post-economic recovery. By the wildest reach of my imagination, I do not see how 4 additional bases or even the 5 existing ones contribute to any post-pandemic economic recovery. I personally do not want this alliance because this alliance has always been abused to the benefit of the Americans and none of the Filipino. It seems the Filipino is ready to defend the Americans in case of an attack on the Americans or any of its equipment in the Asia Pacific. But I'm also sure that the Americans are ready to die up to the last Filipino. Mamatay na tayo dito. Ang layo nila. The security alliances of America is constructed to avoid any attack on its mainland. That is why they will fight the war anywhere else, including the Philippines and now in Ukraine, so that the mainland is out of harm's way. But in closing, I'd like to quote the role model in this debate, Cagayan Governor Manny Mamba, who was virtually present during the Jaime Marcos hearing, quoting President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. who said in the face of regional tensions, and this is your president, the solutions are not going to be military. If they're going to be military, Mamba, quoting Marcos Jr., said, then they are not solutions because it will end up badly if it goes that way. It will end up badly for those involved and even to those who are not involved. To those of you who are watching this and who are listening, I would like to inform you that Governor Mamba has already been started. The Americans have already started bullying Governor Mamba. He has been visited by U.S. Embassy officials and U.S. military officials, asking him all kinds of questions that foreigners don't usually ask citizens of this republic. So remember, next time, do not forget, if you get into trouble, that the Americans are willing to die for you up to the last Filipino. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Adlo Paglinawan, for your closing statement and your analysis. Next, isa sa pinaka-hinahanga natin na matapang, matalino na leader, hindi lang sa labor unions, kundi sa politika, maraming alam. Nakakagulat yun sa dami niyang alam sa politika saka sa geopolitics. Si Calio de Guzman, closing statement niya. Dapat i-elect natin to sa 2 years from now. Gusto niya o ayaw niya?
Maraming salamat, Wilson. Alam naman nating lahat ang history ng gera. Ang kasaysayan ng gera ay kasaysayan ng kagutuman. Kasaysayan ng kahirapan, ng pagpatay sa maraming bilang ng mamayan, pagwasak sa mga ipinundar na yaman ng bawat bansa. Yan yung kasaysayan ng gera. Sa lahat ng mga mamayan, alam yan. At kaya yung mga majority ng mamayan natin, ayaw ng gera. Ang may gusto lang ng gera ay yung mga tao, yung mga organisasyon o partido na gusto magpalawak ng kayamanan, ng teritoryo. Sila lang yon. Kaya sila ay gumagawa ng hakbang para kontrolin ang mga pinuno ng bawat bayan. Kaya't nangyayari ang giyera dahil kasabwat ng mga imperialista at ng mga grupo o bansa na mahilig sa giyera, kinakasabwat nila yung mga pinuno ng mga bansa. Partikular sa Pilipinas, ulitin ko na yung ating gobyerno ay permi na siya'y susuport sa kung anumang naisin ng Amerika na provokasyon at sa tuloy panggigera sa China. Kaya, tansya ko, anumang sarsuela ang ginagawa ng mga opisyal ng gobyerno sa ngayon, sila ay todong susuporta sa plano ng Amerika na manatili ang kanyang kapangyarihan sa buong daigdig. Wala tayong maaasahan sa gobyernong ito para sa ating layuning kapayapaan. Ang pag-asa natin ay palawakin ang ganitong mga forum, magtulong-tulong tayong ipaliwanag sa ating mamayan, immobilize natin ang ating mga mamayan upang obligahin ang ating pamahalaan. Hindi pwede yan sa pakiusap. Kinakailangan natin ay puwersa ng lakas na magtutulak sa kanya na mag-oobliga na umatras dito sa pagpaparami ng site ng EDCA, pagpapatuloy ng pakikipagsabwatan sa Amerika. Pwersahin siya. Hindi sapat ang pwersa ng lakas ang kailangan. Hindi pwersa ng katwiran lang. At sa pinakadulo, kung gusto nating magkaroon talaga ng totoong kapayapaan at nagtatakwil sa gera, sa armas nuklear, kinakailangan natin isang gobyerno ng totoong mga tao. Isang gobyerno ng masa, hindi ng mga elite, hindi ng mga bilyonaryo na ang intensyon sa buhay ay magpayaman ng magpayaman, sukdulang pumasok sa gera kung kinakailangan. Ang kailangan natin ay mga leader masa, leader manggagawa, gobyerno ng masa, hindi ng mga trapo at dinastiya. Hanggat mga sikat, hanggat mga bilyonaryo, hanggat mga elitista, hanggat mga taong ang naniniwala ay ang pag-unlad ng bansa ay ang pakipagsabwatan sa mga malaking kapitalista sa mundo na ginawa natin sa nakaraang 100 taon. Hindi tayo uunlad. Ang uunlad lang ay sila. At gagamitin ang gera para paunlarin ang kailang buhay. Baligtarin natin. Ang sumandig tayo sa mga magsasaka, sa mga manggagawa, sa ating mamamayan. Hindi sa mga kapitalista, hindi diyan. Kasi ang habol ng mga kapitalista ay tubo at ang gera ay pinagtutubuan ng mga may-ari ng armas at saka ng mga firm o international firm sa construction. Kaya yun ang ating gawin sa dulo. Pero sa kagyat, ipalaganap natin ang pagtutol sa gera dahil hindi ito sa atin. Ito'y para sa mga malaking korporasyon ng Amerika at ng China, ng Japan, ng Russia, ng mga kapitalista sa Europe at Australia. Sila ang makikinabang, hindi tayo. At panghuli, ulitin ko, tamang tayo ang magiging pawn, yung Pilipinas ang magiging totoong pawn sa gerang ito kung sakalit matuloy. Pero sa Pilipinas, tayong mga mahihirap, tayong mga walang trabaho, tayong mga manggagawa, tayong mga magsasaka, ang totoong magiging pawn at pambabala sa gerang ito kapag ito'y natuloy. Kaya tutulan natin.
Maraming salamat sa napakagaling na Calio de Guzman. Thank you. Last but not the least, siguro isa sa youngest speakers dito, ang napakagaling din na consumer rights advocate at saka peace activist, Ka-RJ Habeliana, na I think kasama ni late nationalist Butch Valdez. Ka-RJ Habeliana para sa closing statement niya.
Mabuti po at nabanggit ni Ka Wilson yung pangalan ni Professor Butch Valdez. Bago po siya pumanaw, nung kami po ay nag-meeting sa Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino, ang pinakahuling panawagan at mensahe niya ay itong napipintong digmaang nuklear. Ang sabi niya, aanuhin natin yung mga pakikibaka na iba kung ang bomba nuklear ay nakatutok sa atin anytime. Lahat ng mga concerns, issues na ito, ang pinaka-primary na dapat na tahakin natin ay yung landas ng pandaigdigang kapayapaan. Yan po yung mga huling pananalita na binitawan ni Professor Butch Valdez na pumanaw noong December 30, 2022. At alam niyo po yung evil, yung kasamaan, hindi naman natin pwedeng suklian din ng kasamaan eh. Di po ba? Sa Biblia nga, kapag binato ka ng bato, batuhin mo ng tinapay. Kaya natutuwa ako kanina. Binigyan po tayo ng tinapay. Simbolo po ito ng kapayapaan. Yung bato ng imperialistang US, ito yung EDCA, siyam, ito laman nito 15. Talo natin sila, mas marami po ito. Itong simbolo ng kapayapaan. Pero kidding aside po, no? Tama naman yung sinabi ng Biblia eh. Di ba? Batuhin natin ng tinapay sa mapayapang pamamaraan. Yan po yung talagang ating panawagan. At nais ko pong balikan yung mga Pilipinong nauna sa atin na nagsakripisyo para ganap na palayain ng inang bayan. Ito po yung mga katipunero na walang awang pinagpapatay ng mga Amerikano nung sumiklab ang digmaan na yan. Kaya tamang-tama ang panawagan na ito. Bayan, bayan, bayan ko. Hindi patapos ang laban mo. Mapayapang himagsikan. Isulong mo. Isulong mo. Maraming pong salamat at magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat.
Maraming thank you very much, Mr. RJ Habeliana, for your closing statement na bagay sa mga nagugutom na. Nagugutom di lang physically, but intellectually, spiritually. Thank you once again to all our speakers here at Pandesal Forum. Mr. Mike Billington in Virginia. It's almost midnight already there. Already midnight, I think. Mr. Ado Paglinawan. Also, Ka Leody de Guzman here in the middle, who I want to vote for whether he will run or not 2 years from now. And Ka RJ Habeliana, who I think should run also. Ay, hindi pa. Also, via Zoom. Thank you to Professor Ana Malindog Uy. Thank you to all the speakers. Our tradition here, whether you are a movie star, presidential candidate, or senator, or activist, or intellectual, you get free pandesal, including all our media friends. Picture naman tayo with pandesal. Tama sabi ni RJ Abaliana, sabi sa Biblia, if there's, the Bible said, if there people throw stones at you, throw bread. Kaya pandesal bread of the Philippines sa Pandesal Forum ng Kamuning Bakery Cafe. Para matuwa panadero natin. Thank you to all our courageous, eloquent speakers. Yes, thank you. After this, we will sama kayo lahat sa Peace March, Peace Rally now here up to the Boy Scout Memorial Circle at Timog Avenue Corner, Morato Avenue. Thank you for joining. We might have a Pandesal Forum tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. We will announce via may Pandesal Forum pa that tomorrow morning if you are free. 9:30 here, 9:30 a.m. We'll announce the details. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
May tayo pagkain saka pandesal. Huwag niyo kalimutan kunin yung pandesal natin. Maraming salamat sa lahat, sa magagaling na speakers. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Maganda. Pag binato kayo ng bato, bato, kamuning big tinapay. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, ha. Thank you.